we've never made the case or argued the case that somehow Osama Bin Laden was directly involved in 9/11. That evidence has never been forthcoming.
Mr. Pearl, people have been talking about this today as an act of war. Is that how you see it?
Clearly it's an act of war, both in terms of its magnitude and its purpose. Behind these acts of terror are the states that support terrorism, the states that provide the recruitment, the organization, the sanctuary, the planning, the training, the logistics, the money. This could not happen without state support and state sponsorship. And the United States must now do something it has been reluctant to do, and that is hold the states accountable that permit this kind of terrorism to take place.
What was your reaction to what we've just seen?
It's a clear act of war. I believe that Premier Tony Blair put it correctly. It's a time for action, not for just interviews. We know the names of these rogue countries. We know the names of the organizations. The intelligence community know to tell us where they are deployed, and it is a time for action, even if it's going to be a very tough and painful and maybe a struggle that will stretch over a few years.
Reports now of attacks, tracer fire in Kabul, and we will bring you any further details of that as we get them. Richard Pearl, actually, let me just bring you in on that point before we move on. Reports, as I say, of some attacks, explosions in Kabul. You any knowledge of what that might be?
No, I have no knowledge of it, but if it is retaliation against Osama Bin Laden, it's long overdue and should be just the beginning of retribution against the state sponsors of terrorism.
Because it's thought that Osama Bin Laden, who's been linked to this all through the day, is somewhere in Afghanistan and shielded by the Taliban regime there.
Indeed he is, but he works with other governments as well. And until we come to grips with government support for terrorism, we will be vulnerable to attacks even on this scale. This could not be done without governments that assisted in training pilots, in moving people, in moving resources, and providing intelligence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pearl, and to all of you. We'll speak some more to you in a moment. I should say there are reports now of missiles being fired on or exploding in Kabul. We'll bring you any more on that as soon as we can. Now, the name of the Saudi-born terrorist Osama Bin Laden, who we just mentioned, has been raised repeatedly today.
In Afghanistan tonight, reporting that the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, is under missile attack. It's not clear yet. The Pentagon haven't confirmed whether indeed those are American missiles, but clearly this is the presumption of many people on the ground.
And that would start to look like a reprisal based on the speculation that we've seen about Mr. Bin Laden.
Well, clearly it would show a firm conviction on the part of the American security establishment that he was responsible, and a first expression of their anger that for years the struggle they've had to try and get this man handed over by the Taliban regime has been unsuccessful, and if you like, a visitation of their anger on that government.
Let's turn to Frank Gaffney.
The Taliban in Afghanistan, they have offered that they are ready to hand over Osama Bin Laden to Saudi Arabia if the United States drops its sanctions and they have some kind of deal that they want to make with the United States. So do you have any comments?
Let me take that and get back to you on that.
There is no record of any subsequent discussion on that matter.
In Washington, a security expert there. Mr. Gaffney, it seems strange that America has such conviction now that Mr. Bin Laden was responsible, but had no warning that the attack was about to happen.
Well, obviously I'm not in a position to confirm that missiles have been launched in Kabul, let alone that that the United States government is acting on the supposition that Bin Laden was responsible for this attack. I think, as Richard Pearl said a short while ago, if in fact the United States is acting, it's a very welcome and long overdue step, quite apart from his culpability for this crime, or these crimes I should say, this day of crimes. He is an enemy of this country. He has unleashed attacks against American citizens and property in the past, and there's no doubt, whether he did today's events or not, he would be up to it in the future, and he should be stopped. And those who are making common cause with him, who are sponsoring him, who are protecting him, who are permitting him to train in their countries, or otherwise making possible the kinds of sophisticated attacks he certainly has perpetrated in the past, should also be punished.
Richard Pearl, do you believe that there is a strong case for, if this is what it is, a missile attack on Afghanistan based on what's happened today?
Well, indeed. The fact is that Bin Laden is permitted by the authorities in Afghanistan to operate from their territory. And I hope and believe that the United States will now adopt a policy of taking action in response to terrorist attacks against countries that facilitate and support terrorism, against countries like Iraq and Iran and Syria and Sudan and others, because until they pay a price for the support they give to terrorism, they will continue to enable acts of terror on this scale, and we must find a better way to cope with it than the policy of chasing down the individual terrorists.
Bin Laden, who is behind this very attack, when you and the whole world will realize the death toll that had been paid in this event, it will become beyond any doubt of anyone on earth in the free world that a concerted attack against her should be taken, whether it's Bin Laden or not. Bin Laden had done enough to justify what he might suffer in the future, and the same applies to the Hezbollah, to the Islamic Jihad, to the Hamas, to the whoever is ready to host these kind of activities should be automatically isolated from the community of nations and be treated as a rogue state, and every group of terrorists headed by whoever is there should be dealt with.
It's because he's made the World Trade Center his target before. It's because he bombed the American embassy in Kenya, he bombed the American embassy in Tanzania, and he's made clear that he was responsible for the coal, probably. So he's made all these very targets his targets, and if today we find out that they've been attacked, I don't think it's highly speculative to focus our attention on Osama bin Laden.
But Richard Pearl, isn't a strike back at Afghanistan politically dangerous because you end up seeing pictures of civilians who've been killed and injured?
Well, we tend, when responding in this way, to be as precise as it is possible to be. It's worth drawing the contrast with the terrorist acts themselves, which were intended to destroy civilians and not the perpetrators of terrorism. But this mustn't be confined simply to targets in Afghanistan, because we know enough about the involvement of Iraq and other countries in the support of terrorism to know where we should strike back, and it is not just Afghanistan.
What do you think of the way this will be digested, first of all, by the administration and the government?
Well, I wish we had heard a lot more from the administration and the government today. I think one of the hardest things psychologically for me was the absence of leadership, apart from Rudy Giuliani, who I thought was forceful and very comforting kind of figure on the screen. I think Bush should get out of the bunker as fast as he can.
Well, I think there will be some hunkering down, frankly, because we will find ourselves obliged to make certain additional security precautions and certain additional infringements upon civil liberties and personal freedoms that I find very regrettable. But this is precisely, I think, what the terrorists are about. Changing America, not just frightening it, but changing it, defeating it.
Against rogue countries like Iraq and Iran.
It wouldn't have helped today.
It wouldn't have helped, but this event emphasized that there are certain countries in the world, North Korea, Iraq, Iran, maybe Gaddafi, maybe one or more else that are ready to threat the world order by using whatever they have.
The front pages of tomorrow morning's papers, and starting off with The Guardian, which you can see there, a huge photograph. A declaration of war is their headline, the World Trade Tower explosion there, front page. Looks like that. Assault on America. Again, a picture of the skyline. President George Bush's remarks summarized. The U.S. military, they say, is on a near war footing this morning following terrorist attacks on New York and Washington, D.C.
We've never made the case or argued the case that somehow Osama Bin Laden was directly involved in 9/11. That evidence has never been forthcoming.